The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch UK Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised. You're listening to the Dark Nights Paranormal Show with your hosts Kerry Greenaway and Mark Manley, right here on Parasearch UK Radio.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Kerry Greenaway. You're listening to the Dark Nights Paranormal Show, and I'm here with my co-host, my lovely co-host, Mark Manley. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. A little windswept.
Yeah, I noticed. Hair everywhere, yeah.
And Doris certainly took her toll, didn't she?
Yeah, you could say that. Doris smashed my motorbike up, but that's another story.
It certainly is. Never mind. We're here tonight, and what are we talking about tonight, Mark?
Tuatha De Dannan.
We are.
3 times fast. Tuatha De Dannan. They're Irish legend, mythology. They are either precursors to humans, or they are gods, or they are space people, or they are legend that turned into fairies, but not the fairies that you photograph at the bottom of your garden, but fairies more like elves that have an aversion to iron and stuff like that.
That's right. It's very interesting, and I did not realise, because I first heard about the Tuatha De Dannan.
There you go.
I know, I've been practising all week. I first read a book called Fairy Tale, which was written by Raymond E. Feist. And that's when I first came across the story of the Tuatha De Dannan. I'm going to say that lots because I've been practising and I get it right. And but I did not realise that there was a lot more to them, and there is like a lot more history about them, isn't there?
Well, it comes the Dan. If you want to pronounce it properly, it's Tuatha De Dannan. That's how you'd say it in Gaelic. It's Tuatha De Dannan.
Very good. I'm impressed.
But it basically means the tribe of Dannan, and Dannan was one of their gods. I think it was like the main god back then, just before the Celts came to Ireland. They're from the people before the Celts. Yes. There is no gender these days. They are all gods.
Oh, is that right? Is that how we're getting away with that one?
Yes.
Okay, so why don't you tell me a little bit of the backstory that you found out about it, because it was absolutely fascinating to me.
Yeah, sure. Which bits would you like? Would you like, because there's all the different legends. I mean,
right, start at the beginning. Start right at the beginning, going right back.
Well, initially, they're supposed to be a race of godlike people, gifted with supernatural powers, who invaded and ruled Ireland over 4,000 years ago. So we're talking precursors. So if we're talking precursors, are we talking about people from another planet, etc., 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 or were the precursors, as they are in a lot of legend, the people before us, before cavemen, etc., 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 and did they have all these incredible powers and stuff, and then basically stuff themselves and wipe themselves out?
See, I've always just seen them as fairies, and I don't mean like the cute little Tinkerbell type fairies. I've always sort of like the fairy realm with the good and the dark fairy kind of magic and lore surrounding them. But when they first came to Ireland, they came in a very strange way to begin with, didn't they? I mean, like you say, we're going right back to what were the dates?
Well,
tell me.
The first recorded evidence of them comes from the Franciscan monks between 1632 and 1636. And according to them, the Danann were supposed to have ruled from 1897 BC until 1700 BC. But to me, that is an incredibly short space of time to build up such a reputation. But if you go back to basically, I won't say holy books of Ireland because they're not, but I will say like saga books, and I don't mean holidays for the over 50s. the Book of Invasions, which was basically compiled around the year 1150, claims in a poem that they came to Ireland riding in flying ships surrounded by dark clouds. That does not sound like the Celts to me. They landed on Sliabh and Iranin at the Iron Mountain in County Leitrim, where they brought a darkness over the sun lasting 3 days. There's a line which illustrates perfectly the bewilderment felt towards the conquerors. The truth is not known beneath the sky of stars whether they were of heaven or earth. So, highly advanced people arriving in flying things with clouds around it.
Or by ships that were set on fire.
That'd be a bit silly.
Well, not their own ships, obviously.
Well, apparently they landed and came out of the ships, and they were supposed to be tall, very tall, slim, slender, blonde, Scandinavian-looking people. And I know that there is supposed to be a race of aliens that's supposed to be in contact with us, that the government know about, who are called the Nords because they are tall, skinny, blonde, Scandinavian-looking people.
And that is really what you envisage when you envisage Irish people these days, isn't it, really?
See, now, no, because as you know, I'm half Irish and very proud of it. And once upon a time when I had hair, I had red hair. And as you know, both of my daughters have long, lovely red hair.
Yeah, I'm very jealous of them too.
Yeah, so am I, because they've actually got hair. That's now dying out, but the blonde and the red all comes from the Nord, and the Nordic and the Scandinavian. Mm-hmm. I mean, the Scottish side of my family are related to a Viking back from the 11th century called Thor the Tall, so I don't know beyond that. But these beings landed, and they were blonde and red, because strawberry blonde is a form of red hair. So, maybe I'm an alien, and that would explain a lot. Oh, I'm so tempted to say the word alien, but I won't.
I know. See, that is one of the theories you came across when researching the Tuatha De Dannan, weren't you? Didn't you?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not even going to go to the alien because I'm so fairy-minded on this. I can't move off my fairies. I'm sorry, I can't. But one thing is for sure, archaeology has actually unearthed evidence from all around the world of colonies of red-haired people from the same time period of the Tuatha, haven't they?
Yeah. And also, if you look into legends about it's going slightly off on a tangent here, but if you look at the legend of the Anunnaki, that's around the same time frame.
I just find it incredibly interesting because in excavations in China have revealed mummies with red and blonde.
That's right. And you've got those discs that were found in the mountain as well, which nobody knows what they are. They're bronze, really thin bronze discs, a bit like records, and they're etched with pictographs of flying saucers and this, that, and the other. Nobody knows who they are, how they got there, what they got there, but it shows a story in these discs explaining a UFO coming down, landing, and the people from the UFO intermingling with the people there, and they're supposed to have had red hair. But their ship was knackered, and that's why they couldn't leave. But they mixed with the Chinese in that particular part. Because they had the red hair, you've got a mixture of everything, and the Mongol starts and everything like that.
I still want to go with the burning of the ships. That's how they arrived in Ireland. I'm sorry. I know you'd love this to be an alien story, but I just can't do that with this particular story. I can't.
My own theory is, well, there's a couple of theories is as to, A, why the hell would they set fire to their own ships? And B, if these people had incredibly advanced, I was going to say packages then, but that sounds really dodgy. If they had incredibly advanced weapons, that's just as bad, and technology and everything like that, then either precursors or perhaps that's how the Irish interpreted them as fairies or fae folk,
Well,
or as the she.
So we've got to the point where they've arrived in Ireland, but they weren't obviously native to Ireland. There were people that lived in Ireland before then, and they were looking to overthrow these people. So who were they? Tell me about the people. Tell me about those people.
Well, the one I'm trying to find in their names, the ones that had the fight with. I'm sorry, what?
Firbolg. I don't know how you say these words. I'm so sorry with my pronunciations. You're going to get this all night, me going, I don't know how to say that, but this is what I think you're supposed to say.
Bulge.
The existing ruling tribe was the Fir, and that's F-I-R, and then Bulge, B-O-L-G. I'm not quite sure how you would say that. And they were, and then the Dannan were going to fought them to basically become the rulers of Ireland. So it does sound very Viking-y, doesn't it? It does sound very typically...
Were they the ones that went out into the wilderness, into the desert, and became the Formonians?
I don't know. I do know that the Tuatha De Dannan came to Ireland, fought the people...
Firbolg. I found them, Firbolg.
Firbolg.
Firbolg, yeah.
A little bit better.
They were the original people there. The Firbolg. They had the Tuatha De Dannan won the inevitable battle with the Firbolg, and out of respect for the manner in which they fought, allowed the Firbolg to remain in Connaught, where the victors ruled the rest of Ireland. So, yeah, they were basically the humans at the time.
Now, there's a very interesting tale regarding one of the battles, because the High King of the Dannan, now, Nuatha Orgethlam?
Nuada.
Him.
Yeah.
He lost an arm in one of the battles, didn't he?
Yeah. And they made him... Yeah.
This is quite an interesting legend, because if it's true, then I kind of understand why you would...
True, I want to know the person that made it.
Well, you kind of wonder how they managed to do this. Anyway, he lost an arm, but because of his position at that time, he couldn't be seen to be anything less than whole. So because he's lost his arm, they then built him like a bionic arm, didn't they?
Because he'd lost his arm, they gave the honour of being the king to Brias, who was the leader of the Formonians. And then they had a fight with the Formonians, and they seemed to like scrapping. How can you tell I'm half Irish? Anyway, they kept scrapping and drinking and cursing and having all these fights, and then they said, Jesus, you know what? We've beaten this little git here. He shouldn't have been made the king. We'll have you back there, Nuada. Let somebody make him bionic arm. So they made him bionic arm out of solid silver and gave it to him and put him back on his rightful throne as king.
Yeah. So bionic arm.
Yeah. $6 million man back then.
Back then. Now that fascinates me, because now you could look at it quite prosaically, I suppose, that to anybody who was quite primitive at the time, any form of prosthetics, whether or not that be, it was actually a wooden arm rather than a bionic arm as we think of today, would have seemed quite astonishing. And they were supposed to be more advanced than the people that were in Ireland at the time.
Well, the thing is, as you know, and I don't know if the listeners know, I have got an artificial leg. I've just got no foot, and I've got 1.5 hands. Now, if these things were around these days, a bionic silver arm, I'll sign up for that straight away. But if these people were as advanced as I think they may have been, I mean, they obviously must have been advanced if they came as ships that were in the air, for a start. You know, and they talk about swords of light and swords of fire and this, that, and the other, which back then would have been our explanation for some sort of, I don't know, beam weapon or something like that. I don't know. But if they had that sort of technology, then they would have had the technology for prosthetics for pretty much every single part of the body, bionic everything. So, you know, I mean, I'd love to know all about that.
Now, they actually came... You mentioned, like, some of the artefacts that they're supposed to have. And there were supposed to be 4 treasures for the Tuatha De Dannan, weren't there?
If you just bear with me. One of them was summer. If I remember rightly, you have got the cauldron.
Yep.
The sword. The stone. And the spear. And I'm sure the months are involved in those as well, if I remember rightly.
They are. They do link in. But let's just talk about the treasures for the minute, and then we can go on to the symbology and how that links into other things first. So let's just talk about the Sword of Light first. This is one of the treasures that was brought with them, and these were supposed to have been 4 magical talismans of huge power. Now, the first one, as I say, was the Sword of Light. Now, are you going to pronounce it? Can you pronounce that?
Sword of Light was Cledeb.
It was what?
Cladeb.
Cladder.
That's close enough. That's close enough.
Now, this was supposed to have been made in the northern city of Findius, and it was brought to Ireland by the king, and no one was supposed to have ever escaped from it once it was drawn against them. But now this is where it was supposed to be this huge talisman of great power, because it was supposed to have been a huge glowing white torch, and it was when I was reading about this, it reminded me. Now, I'm not one for introducing space age technology.
I know where you're going with this. I know where you're going.
It reminded me of a lightsaber.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Why is this one?
Now, we're going to talk about these in a little bit more depth in a minute, but I just want to cover these quickly. The second one was Lou's spear.
The spear of light as well, isn't it? The spear that never misses its mark.
That's right. Now, it was also supposed to be made out of yew wood. Now, we know the legends of yew wood. Yew in itself is a very magical tree. It's supposed to be the tree of love and commitment in British wood history, I suppose you want to call it. Theology regarding trees, when I'm working with herbs and woods and energies in that way. I talked about the yew tree, so it's interesting that this is supposed to have been made from yew.
Well, I didn't make it, no.
No, I know you didn't make it.
The shaft was supposed to be made from yew, yeah. That's like longbows, they were originally made from yew.
And again, because it's supposed to have been this magic talisman, again, it's got a legend that surrounds it, and it was supposed to be a fiery lance from which sparks as big as eggs flew when the spear heat takes hold of it. So it's almost like it has to charge up. And then in order for the flames... Exactly, it's almost like it has to charge up. And in order to prevent the flames of the tip consuming the shaft and the person who's holding it, the spearhead was dipped into the cauldron of mysterious sorceress.
And ladies and gentlemen, this is what happens when you drink and broadcast.
Oh dear. Liquid. And it, again, like I said, it's almost like you had to charge it up to then fire out these...
Sounds like it was dipped in a catalyst.
Yeah, it's...
Sounds like some sort of energy weapon that was dipped in a catalyst to create the huge beam that came off it.
I'm wondering if there was... I don't know what would have been available at that time.
Greek fire.
Pardon?
We did have Greek fire back then that they still, to this day, don't really know the recipe of. So it could have been a derivative of something like that. But the spear enabled it to be emitted.
Flick it, and it sort of seems like balls of flame coming out the end of it. Possibly.
I don't know about flicking balls, but I mean, there could certainly be some sort of beam weapon that chucks it out there. I myself reckon they might have found some sort of stone that... Because magnetic stones, if you get big enough and powerful enough, you can actually emit some sort of power from it or some sort of energy from it. Or something like that with a catalyst. And remember, these guys were way in advance of us as we are at this day. So they could have added something that chucked some sort of energy out there, dipped it in a catalyst, and that created sheaves of flame and sparks and lightning, and not something I want to go near, apart from light my barbecue with.
But whilst we're talking about these, it kind of is starting to show you why they kind of have been... Lots of legends and myths have started already, and this is just at the point of history we're talking about where they're supposed to have been real life people, and why these myths and legends started to build up around these people. We haven't even got into the fairy bit yet, have we? I
have no doubt. I mean, so as I've said on previous shows, I mean, every single myth and legend, there has to be something originally there in the first place to get that myth and legend. So no matter what it was, there was originally something there to start it. Mm-hmm. And it's like as Richard said in the chat room there, swords, he was right, swords were very prized possessions, and the makings of them was looked upon as a magical process. The Japanese, when they made the katanas and everything, they revered it, folded the metal thousands and thousands of times, and the way they used to test their swords, I think I brought this up before, the Japanese, they used to stack up the condemned and chop them in half, and if it went through like a stack of 7 or 8 bodies, it was a good sword, and it was etched with special markings and runes and prayers and everything before it was presented to the shogun.
Exactly. But again, even with the Tuatha, they used to allegedly put loads of different symbology and markings on their possessions, purely and simply because of the symbology and the belief that these symbols infused power into the object. So that it's so interesting. Now, the other thing was that we still haven't finished with their things. So that's there was also the cauldron, and it was also known as the Cauldron of Plenty. Now, this reminded me of a Greek legend.
Dagda's cauldron.
Who?
Dagda's cauldron. You're on about the Horn of Plenty as well.
I'm talking about the Horn of Plenty, yes. Yeah. So it's, and this is where you start to get crossovers into other cultures, which, again, is a common theme when we started looking at the Tuatha. There was a lot of cross-cultural things, wasn't there, that we found? But also,
this is what I've been talking about when I said precursors. Every single culture has an identical thing.
It's very, very strange. Now, this cauldron, it was supposed to have had the power to bring the dead back to life, and it was supposed to give you plenty of food and water and whatever it is you needed, basically, out of this cauldron. And now, basically, none would go unsatisfied. So whatever you wanted from this cauldron, then that is supposed to be. Richard, it was a calcite. Sorry, he's just put sunstone for
I saw. I was reading it,
and it's actually a calcite. Sorry. Just putting that out there.
Oh!
So this is the Dagda's cauldron. We're talking about cauldrons. And the other one was, the last one was a stone of destiny. Now, the stone of destiny was supposed to be a coronation stone. Now, it was supposed to be that is where the rightful High King of Ireland would be coronated. And that's right, isn't it? Coronated.
Yeah, and they also, interesting fact, Terry Pratchett took that legend and put it in the Discworld books, as that is called the Scone of Stone, which is where the dwarves were crowned king.
That's right, very good. I love the Terry Pratchett reference there.
I've got every single book. I've read them all. I'm a complete nut job on Discworld, so yeah.
I know, I love it. So, now what is interesting about this one is that whoever stood on that stone, the cry, or his, oration, would be heard throughout the whole of Ireland. Now, I always think
you need to expand on that a little bit, because the stone was by the god Fal, and he was the god of fertility, and the ruling kings would stand on the stone just before when they had got married, and they would stand on the stone just before they went to bed and went, aliens! See, I got it in there. Just before they had their wicked way with their fair maiden. And if their cry was one of, yes! Or whatever they would say, then he was of good worthy, good merit, and he could go on and he would sire a child. If it was a bad cry, the Gaelic equivalent of old bugger, then he would not sire any children, and he was a bad ruler. Yeah, didn't know that, did you?
I glossed that part of it. I'm not going to lie.
You needed to bring that in. You did need to bring that bit in.
Now, what is interesting about this, this stone got broken into two, and one half was carried away to Scotland, where apparently it allegedly ended up in the throne of the British monarchy, but I couldn't find any verification on that.
It's supposed to be hidden because the tribes, when we were all tribes, Celtic tribes, because remember the Celts are Scottish and Irish, and that's one of the reasons why it was allegedly split up, was so that one half stayed with the kings of Ireland, one half stayed with the kings of the Scottish Celts. That's from a completely different story for another time.
Okay, but as I say, I couldn't find any verification, but this stone was supposed to have been split, and it's supposed to still remain there to this day, but we'll find out one day. Now, how the Tuatha De Dannan ended up being delegated to the underworld?
Basically, they had a war with the what were the precursors to modern day humans. And let me just go back to my notes here, because although I know all this stuff, some names of things I'm useless with. Let me just find their names accordingly. I think I know this stuff,
Martians.
Right, here we go.
Not Martians.
Say again?
Martians.
Not Martians. No,
You've
definitely
got
wasn't
enough
Martians.
pronunciation of these names, haven't you?
Oh, right, hang on, here we go. No, it definitely wasn't the Martians.
No, I said Milesians. Oh, dear. Now,
here we go.
these were the first Gaels in Ireland.
Professor Ophalius.
There was 2 battles, and they were defeated, weren't they?
That's right, the Milesians, yeah. They were defeated in 2 battles by the
See,
Milesians.
that makes a lot more sense, the Milesians, rather than the Martians.
They were supposed to be the first Gaels in Ireland. Basically, they're the precursors of humans, but they were taller, bigger and stronger than we are.
And what did they have, Mark?
Hair, I would imagine.
They had iron.
Oh, they had iron, yeah. They made their weapons out of iron because legend has it that the Tuatha De Dannan were allergic to iron. And again, that was used by Terry Pratchett in the Discworld books. The elves are allergic to iron. And in legend and myths, not just from the Celts, but all around the world, especially Middle and Eastern Europe, fairies are allergic to iron.
Exactly, and that is one of the reasons why iron is supposed to be such a potent protector, because it's supposed to protect you from the Fae and from elemental energy. Now, and this is where it got interesting, and this is where we sort of go into the more fairy legend, but we have got other things we need to cover before we get into the fairy legend, I know. But anyway, what happened was they agreed that the new invaders, these Milesians...
Yeah, it's close enough.
And the Dannans, they would take half of Ireland... Oh, God, I'm losing track here. They would split Ireland, basically, into 2 halves. There would be the above ground, and then the Dannan would retreat below. Now, before we go any further into that little one, I am going to take a little break.
Why not?
You're listening to the Dark Nights Paranormal Show with your hosts, Kerry Greenaway and Mark Manley, right here on Parasearch UK Radio.
Hello, this is Kerry Ann. Please join me every Thursday at 9 p.m. on Seventh Sanctum, only on Parasearch UK Radio.
Hello, join me, Paul Rook, every Tuesday at 9 p.m. for the Trident Paranormal Show, with interviews, news and reviews from this galaxy and beyond, only on Parasearch UK Radio.
You're listening to Parasearch UK Radio. News, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. Parasearch UK Radio.
Welcome back. Now, before we had that quick break, we got to the point where basically the Dannan and the Milesians had this battle, and then they decided that they were going to split Ireland, and the Milesians were going to have above ground and left the Dannan to retreat below ground. Now, this is where we come into something called... Now, this is another one where I am really bad at pronunciation. Is it sheed? This is where...
She. You don't say the D. It's pronounced she.
She.
Yeah.
Which is, in Irish folklore, the she were descendants of the pre-Celtic inhabitants of Ireland, which just happened to be the Tuatha De Dannan.
The she were the Tuatha De Dannan.
I know, but this is where it all goes into the fairy lore, which is like, I love this bit.
The basic Tuatha De Dannan, they had a fight again with the Milesians. They had 2 battles. And some legends say they lost, some legends say they won, but from what I can work out, it was basically a draw. And then they agreed with the Milesians to say, right, fine, we'll rule half of Ireland each. You can have the top half, we'll have the bottom half. But that could be interpreted as, well, you know that they go through the She Stones, the land of She, the mountains, and the fairy stones. Those are portals or entrances to the land of the She, the land of the Dannan. So, is it ruling the underworld? Have they gone to the underworld? Or is it a portal to, I don't know, another dimension? Onion theory dimensions, have they gone to a different place? And that portal is a doorway to get there. Because there's still reports now of them interacting with humans in Southern Ireland and Northern Ireland when they meet. You've heard of the Banshee?
Yes.
You've also got the Catshee as well.
Yes.
And the Catshee, when it interacts with the humans, can supposedly talk, and the Catshee is a precursor to the Dannan coming out and helping.
That's it. Now, each fairy mound is linked to a court, a fairy court.
Each fairy mound. Do carry on.
I'm going to call them fairy mounds. I know you find that hysterical, but I'm going to call them fairy mounds. I'm sorry. And you do find these in woods, great big mounds of
yes,
earth,
great big
basically
mounds.
covered.
Great big fairy mounds.
Earth, fairy mounds. Now, each fairy mound is supposed to be fixed to a specific court. And on the fire festivals throughout the year, there are 4 fire festivals. They're supposed to go on a trip, basically, and they all swap mounds and they have a little journey to different mounds, don't they?
Yeah. It's that word, mound, I'm sorry. Fairy mounds, they all swap mounds and have journeys to different mounds. Sounds like a good time was had by all.
They have parties and everything.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's when the veils are thin enough, isn't it?
The veils are thinner, and that's when they do their travelling. And that's
you can only do it on the sheet mount.
Travelling.
Yeah, that's right. I'm just reading about it. Tina Nog is one of the realms, one of the lands of the fairies, and the time is supposed to stand still.
That's
so nobody ages. Nobody. That's why you got all the myths about the fairies and the fae folk not aging, is because their land time isn't. It's not part of quantum in their realm.
Yeah, we have got a dog she in the background as well. That's my dog, my hellhound. He's having a little grumble in the background.
No, that's Kerry's paranormal hound, and our paranormal hound, I think, is in the other room, curled up on bed asleep. So, yeah.
He has to put a little bit of talk in every show, does my little hellhound, so I do apologise.
So you got Linen She, Banshee, and Catshee. And the Linen She, thank you very much, not really heard of much these days, but they were artisans, basically. They were what's his name? Famous geezer, Italian, made lots of paintings and inventions. 16th century.
Leonardo da Vinci, by no remote
That'll be the one, not Caprio, Da Vinci. He was, there is theory that he was one, because all the real famous artisans around that time were supposed to have been the she that said, do you know what, I actually want to live in the realm of the humans. But only certain members of the she or Dannan were allowed to do it. And it was those ones that became the really famous inventors or painters or scholars, whatever you want to call them,
That's it. Now, also humans, there's a famous case, I suppose you'd like to call it, of Thomas Rhymer. Now, he was a Scottish man, I believe. I could be wrong on this. I'm a bit hazy on this one. And he fell in love with one of the queens of the fairy court. And he basically wasn't allowed to eat or drink in the fairy realm, otherwise he'd be consigned there forever. But when it was time for him to go back to the land of the humans, he decided that he loved her so much he would stay with her. And there's famous poetry and sagas written about that. So there is a certain amount of crossover, but they're also supposed to have the power of concealment, which is why it's so vague. Even to this day, people say they've seen fairies and stuff, don't they?
Yeah, that's right. Well, look, there's a case in Ireland, and this is you can look this one up. There was a motorway being built in Ireland in the 80s, I think it was. I can't remember which motorway it was, but it was going to cut through a tree that belonged to the fairies, which was one of their entrances. And this guy campaigned, and the Irish government said, do you know what, he's right, if we knock that tree down, we're up Poop Creek. And they actually diverted the motorway so that it didn't interfere with this fairy entrance.
That's right. And in Norway, I believe, they would rather build around a mound or a tree or something like that rather than disturb that particular piece of land. Now, there is
some of their roads have got tunnels for the fairies.
Yeah, they will actually build it around. So, even today, there is huge superstition surrounding the fairy realm. I mean, even to this day, people will leave out little saucers of milk for the fairy on certain festival days, these fire festival days, don't they?
Yep, that's right. And you know, we were talking about the famous their concealment.
Mm-hmm.
That is why we see them as little small folk, because of their concealment spells or cloaks or whatever they use, when in actual fact they are same size as us, maybe taller, and incredibly good looking, you know.
Wow, of course.
Where do you think my family line comes from?
They're not very... I want you to get the point, though, that they're not fluffy little fairies. We're not talking
No.
lovely, benevolent Tinkerbell type characters.
No,
they have
definitely not.
a serious edge to them. There's also good, or the fair folk, and then there's also the dark court as well. And these dark court are supposed to be like very mischievous and can be quite nasty in places. They try and lead people off pathways into bogs, and this crosses into Will-o'-the-Wisp.
Woodshut and the Clurican.
That's it. There's, as I say, when you start looking at these legends, it builds up this picture of something a little bit darker and a little bit more worrying than what we all know and love from fairy tales. And I don't mean, I mean like the Hans Christian Andersen kind of fairy tales. They're quite nice. They come across as quite nice, don't they? But they're
Most
not
fairy tales,
really.
Exactly. Most fairy tales are taken from fables and legends anyway. But they were because when you look at the original fairy tales, like Grimm's fairy tales, when you look at the original ones, they were horrible, horrific things. They weren't nice at all. And fairies are like any other place. You get good and bad. You come to London, you definitely got good and bad. Anywhere you go, it's good and bad. But the fairies, you've got the nasty little things that the Knack Mac Fever were based on, and then you've got the good ones, who, in Gaelic legend, are the tall, blonde, beautiful people. But on the flip side of that is the Terry Pratchett version of them in Lords and Ladies, where they are tall, blonde, beautiful, and they keep up this veil of pretense, when in actual fact, they were the nasty ones. And they were horrible and this, that and the other, and they were scared of the iron,
That's right. Now, well, I mean, they also are supposed to be able to blur your memory. So if you do come across them, you're not supposed to really particularly remember it.
And that's because it's Ireland and it's whiskey. But carry on.
But there's fairy folklore all across the world, isn't there?
Yeah. And as James was saying, you've got the trolls and fairies and everything, and you were saying up in Norway and all that lot as well. And the trolls are supposed to be related to the fairies. And
there's a huge link to, in particular, Germany, Scandinavia, Norway, Iceland. Those kind of countries are so still very, very superstitious, still very, very believing in fairies. And like we discussed earlier, they will build roads and stuff avoiding these places that are supposed to be sacred to these fairies, because there is also supposed to be a pact that was supposed to be between the humans and the fairies that exists allegedly to this very day.
That's right, the accord.
And that is so we don't destroy their lands, because obviously that's where their courts and that's where they live and come forward and stuff like that, and their portals, as you discussed. And also, we're supposed to give them a certain amount of gold, which brings us into the legend of the leprechaun. I
knew.
this.
Do you know what? My father swears. I mean, he might well swear. He's passed away now. But my father, he was from County Roscommon, just south of Dublin in Ireland. And him and my aunts and uncles swear on, as they would put it, the little people. And I know my dad. He was ex-SAS. I knew he used to joke and swear and curse like a trooper. But he was always serious, and he genuinely believed in them. And the family knew all about them, and the family had dealings with them. And as you said, they would put out food for them. And they still, as far as I know, my uncle over in Dublin, he still puts little trays of food out for them and stuff. And that's why I know about the Accord. But I don't know what they used to do for my family hundreds of years ago, the Manley family. I don't know anything about that. All I know is our family are descended from artisans earlier, and they knew about the little people. And something with them, but I don't know what.
That's it. Now there's I mean, we could talk about different types of fairies or legends that surround these. I want to talk about the little leprechaun though, because of the gold thing, and it's supposed to be a pot of gold at the end of a rainbow. If you find the end of a rainbow, you'll find this leprechaun. Well, again, that's not particularly true, is it? Because the leprechaun is supposed to be this little man.
Supposed to be his purse filled with gold.
Yeah, and he's clad even in scarlet and green, and he's a cobbler.
That's right, yeah, and that's where you get the
cobbler.
That's where you get the fairy tale about the old man and the elves.
And if you ever catch one, that's right, yeah, I remember that story. And if you catch one, he will grant you his purse, which is supposed to be filled with gold. But nobody's managed to do that so far.
That's
I want to know where these leprechauns are, that's for sure.
We've also got the cluricaun as well, and the cluricaun is the same as the leprechaun, except he's always drunk. So I swear my next door neighbour is a cluricaun.
Sounds like my kind of party.
They're basically the same. They only come out at night. They're always drunk, and the cluricaun are the protectors of alcohol stocks, and especially in wine cellars. So you know that time when you've got quite a few, you got a lot of drinks left over from a party. Here's one, and this also comes from the Nat Mac Feegle, which are fairies, which are in the Discworld books. When you have a party and you've got lots of drinks left over, lots of bottles, and give it a couple of weeks, you go to these bottles because you fancy a drink, and then you go, oh, where did that go? What happened to that? Yeah, That comes from the cluricaun because he is the keeper of the spirits and the alcohol, and he needs to be paid.
Well, if you put iron at your doorways and windows, then he wouldn't be able to get to your spirits. That's all I can say on that one.
Cluricaun can be helpful. They're normally mischievous and that, but if you're good to them, they will be good to you. Same with leprechauns. If you're good to them, they'll be good to you. But you've also got Puka or Puka.
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 Now this little chap was made very, very famous by a very, very famous writer called Shakespeare. And he wrote a play called The Midsummer Night's Dream, where he talked about the fairy realms and stuff like that, didn't he?
Puck.
And, yeah, the Puka is translated to Puck in The Midsummer Night's Dream. Now, he, again, is another little mischievous little spirit, and he finds amusement in tricking unwary people. And it appears sometimes as a large talking stallion.
Easy tiger, yeah, but it's supposed to trick wayward travellers into getting on its back if they want to lift, and then the puck will go ha, and he'll race off at 200 miles an hour. You are too scared to get off him, and you hang on for dear life, like I did when I was little and I was on a donkey at Blackpool Beach, and the thing took off and I hung on for dear life. Anyway, and then eventually it'll stop, chuck you off him miles away from where you are, and that's idea. The puka's idea of fun.
Of having some fun with somebody.
Yeah.
But it also brings in the idea of shape-shifting.
That's right, yeah. Go on.
Which is a whole new subject, isn't it? Shape-shifting.
There is, but I was just reading a comment that James Steele has said about the skeletons they found of small villagers who lived in mounds and defended themselves with long, sharp sticks from holes in their mounds. Yes, he's actually right. He's right about that, because not only have you got the ones they call the hobbits found in the Indonesian island, there have also been in Southern Ireland and in parts of the Northern Hebrides, etc., these little small skeletons that have allegedly been found that made up little villages and stuff, and they found the old post holes and everything. And again, it's another type of proto-human whatever that was intelligent and walked about, but was only little.
Mm.
So, I mean, is it a collective legend? Is it, it stems from these little people, or is there something in it?
Again, we will probably never know.
So, like I say, they're supposed to be related to the Sidhe, and the Sidhe are only called the Sidhe because after the battle, and when Ireland was split up and they went into the other realm, the underworld, that's when the Tuatha De Dannan became the Sidhe, because their entrances to fairy mounds were called sheaths and everything like that. So that's where they get the name from. But who's also to say that these leprechauns and banshees and pucks and everything like that, who's to say that they're not some form of offspring of these? Another one for you.
I don't know. I mean, there is legends regarding the Sidhe, regarding, in particular, I'm thinking of, and this is actually more a British legend of fairy, a guy called Wayland Smith. Now, he was supposed to be a smith. Now, how this links into the Tuatha is they were supposed to were supposed to have been fantastic smiths, weren't they?
Right, yeah.
And he was supposed to be like the king of smith makers. Yeah. That's not the right term, I know. Smiths?
Master Smith.
Master Smiths. That's better. Thank you, Mark, for helping me out with my terminology there.
You're very welcome.
He was supposed to be able to make swords and, spearheads and armour that was supposed to have supernatural powers. Does this remind you of anything?
Ooh, possibly. Could you be talking about the Danann?
Quite possibly. Now, there's a whole legend about Wayland Smith himself, but one thing I would like to say, this makes me a little uncomfortable, he was supposed to be incredibly sexual, and just when he worked his bellows and was working this the metals, I want to say, because it goes a little bit against the myth that iron, they were allergic to the iron because he's a smith and they work with iron, don't they?
Yeah, but not all fairies are supposed to be allergic to iron, are they? If you've got the ones that interbred with the humans, they wouldn't be allergic to it, or they'd have a very watered down aversion to it.
Well, apparently Wayland Smith was very, very enjoyed females a lot. That's all I'm going to say. He enjoyed females a lot. When Wayland
Smith used to make his things that were imbued with magical properties, he believed that whilst the metals were fusing together, if he and a young lady
copulated,
made their own sort of fondling of bellows, then the energy that was spent whilst his bellows were being used went and imbued the metal and imbued it with the properties that he needed to give it the powers he wanted.
Which is a little weird because in ritual work, that's exactly where
Mr. Crowley,
that theory comes from. The energy that's created whilst two people make love.
Sexual energy.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, what you can't see is that we can see each other on the camera and she's going red.
I can't do this live.
She's going
I get
so red.
And I get so embarrassed. Get me on private. I can talk like that till the cows come home. But on air, I get all flustered.
And you've just let everybody know what you get up to in your own time.
But again, it links in. Now we're going back a little bit to the cross-cultural thing, and this is where I'm going with this, because going back to those four symbols those four objects that we talked about earlier on, they come up in something which I know a little bit about, which is tarot, because this spear that's supposed to throw out fireballs.
Foul spear.
That's right.
you go talking about balls again. You need to keep this on the level of the Tuatha De Dannan now, young lady. I mean, come on.
I can't help myself. It always ends up coming to this level and I get so embarrassed about it. I don't understand it. We're going to have to do a subject that's got nothing to do with that kind of energy. I'm having to say that right now. Can't we just be more normal next week?
Yeah, exactly. As Richard said, the Smiths did make very good crisps as well. I hardly think, though, that when they were making crisps, they thought, oh, let's have a quick one whilst we're getting a packet of prawn cocktail on the go, you know.
Well, you never know.
That would explain the horrible taste of it, but carry on.
So anyway, we're talking about cross-culturals. Now, I know that the tarot was supposed to, allegedly, although it's very, very difficult to pinpoint exactly where tarot came from, but it was supposed to have come from the Egypt realms, wasn't it? And those kind of areas.
You know about tarot, I don't.
I know, but we're talking about the spear, which relates to the wands in a deck of tarot.
Spear comes from
which relates to the element of fire and summer.
Yeah, and summer was one of the gifts that the Tuatha De Dannan gave us.
That's right.
It's in the chronicles of them as well.
Okay, it is.
And also, one thing I will point out, you know, we're talking about multicultural legends and this, that and the other. Mm-hmm. When you look at the Mahabharata, that's one of the battles that they have in that, the Indian book Mahabharata.
Oh, right.
One of the holy books, and it chronicles the people before the people again, like the Tuatha De Dannan. It chronicles their gods and people before. What one of their weapons that one of their gods had was a spear that spat out energy and this, that, and the other. But this spear would wipe out their flying saucers, the Vimaras that they used to fly around in.
Wow.
Mm. And
see,
Vimaras,
this is what fascinates me about all sort of aspects that we talk about and that we do. The amount of crossovers in culture. I'm sure I was talking about this with Andy Mercer the other day. There's so many No, I tell you who it was. You're going to hear all about that on a different topic on a Sunday. I've got an interview with the amazing John Polk, and that's going out on Sunday. And we were talking about cross-cultures and how things all relate into, and how there are common themes between religions and stuff like that. Well, this is exactly the same, but on a more esoteric level, a more supernatural level, or a more, and I can't believe the words are coming out of my mouth, alien level?
aliens! Yes, that's
although I hate linking fairies with aliens, it just doesn't feel right to me. Anyway, the spear is supposed to be very, very symbolic in its own right. It is a symbol of single-minded aim, of direct action. It is the beginning, and oh my goodness, it's an extremely phallic symbol. We're back to that again.
She's off again. Penny in the chat room saying it's all very phallic, isn't it? Yes, it is.
It is, Penny. It's incredibly phallic.
She's gone bright red. I will say that the spear is supposed to be a conductor of high energy electricity as well. So, just to change the subject. But yes, it is supposed to be very phallic.
Very phallic. Oh. Now, the stone we talked about earlier on, which was the stone where he stands on, and it's supposed to have great powers of communication, relates to the pentacles in tarot, and it relates to winter. Now, the stone of destiny is, oh goodness me.
Go on. Go on. Ladies and gentlemen, Kerry's having a meltdown.
Oh, I'm going to leave you to do this.
What, the stone? Which one would you like me to read? Because I could talk about people. Well, basically, you were supposed to live by the stone. The royal family and everything was supposed to live by the stone. One such legend tells us that the High Kings of Ireland were ritually married to the goddess, living in the Stone of Destiny, which stood at Tara. But before I talked about this, before the nuptials, the High King was summoned by the goddess, and if his measure was lacking, the goddess embodying the stone would scream her displeasure. A contender for the kingship could then present himself.
The stone is incredibly grounding, and it's supposed to...
He had to be naked to stand on it. He had to be naked, his own stones out, so that the goddess could look into his soul, look at him as a human, look into his soul and go, yeah, you're worth it, or no.
Right, I'm actually going to read this bit out. I'm going to read this bit because I can't actually put my own words into this because it goes far too rude. It says, need a healing? Wrap yourself around a stone that's going to drive your juices right into the womb of the earth where all things go back for renewal. So that basically sums up the symbology.
I nearly spat my tea everywhere then.
Oh my goodness. Right, now the sword relates to the swords in tarot, and that relates to the altar. I know, I'm so sorry, Penny. It's all about that tonight. Well, it's not. It's about Tuatha De Dannan, but the symbology, they worked with this kind of symbology. I can't help it. Now, this relates to air, the element of air. And that is the element of communication. Oh my goodness, thank goodness we're nearly at the end of this, because I can't do much more on this subject. Now, swords obviously are very much cutting, obviously, purity of battle. They talk about intent. It's about thought patterns and concise, effective communication. And you can't get a clearer message than hitting somebody with a sword.
Really? Well, no, I thought they'd hit them over the head with something else, just as bad. That would get the message across, like a stick.
This is true. Now, the cauldron, which was the cauldron of plenty,
which is also about fertility.
To the Tarot of Cups, which relates to the season of spring. Oh my goodness! No, we're going to end on another. Do I actually need to go into this? All I'm going to say on this one is cups, love. Please, Mark, help me out with this one.
Would you like me to talk about the cauldron?
Go on. No. Yes. Sorry, the cauldron.
It's cauldron associated with the water element, which fits nicely with the concept of cleansing, healing, rebirthing, and resurrection. All traditionally feminine qualities. Even the Celts weren't very hung up on the gender labels. But it's magic, and there's a little goddess in every single god. Yes, it's to do with fertility. Yes, it's to do with life and birth. Every single thing in all mythology, in all of Europe and all around the world, at the end of the day, all comes down to rudeness and pure filth. But it's because of the energy that's expended in that. And anything that looks like a sword or a spear is male, and anything that looks like a cup or a horn of plenty or a cauldron of plenty, whatever, because it's a round receptacle type object, is female. So it doesn't really matter how you word it or how you edge it. Long, stiff, straight things, male. Round things, female. I rest my case.
And these things all came from the legends of the Tuatha De Dannan. And
they did come, yes.
If you worship with an altar, then you would use symbols of those four things on your altar as well.
I ain't putting anything like that on my altar, I tell you. I think the priests around here would have a flip.
I have lots of friends that do altars. I even do like little altars at various times of the year.
That when you put your weird shaped crystals on them. Your wands.
Yeah, he's talking about my wands again. Leave my wands out of this subject. My goodness. But honest to God, it's when you start looking at the cross-cultures of where we started with the Tuatha De Dannan, I was thinking this show would be about fairy lore, lots of different types of fairies and all that sort of thing. But actually, I was actually quite amazed at the whole story and how it interlocked in lots of beliefs and lots of different ways that we work with the esoteric and the metaphysical world, even in this day and age, as well as being steeped in law that comes through that we still live by, some people still live by, in this day and age. I was actually quite surprised by that. So, I don't know if I showed you a different side to what you knew, because you knew more the historical side of it, didn't you, Mark? And I knew more the legends and the myth side of it.
I knew all about the precursors and the aliens, and that stuff.
Third time,
but the Tuatha De Dannan, the time period for the Tuatha, is precise with the Norse gods, with the Roman gods, with the Greek gods, and then the Mahabharata, and then Indonesia, then China, and as I was saying in the room earlier when I was talking about those things that were found in China, all the same time frame. All talking about redheads, all talking about blondes, all talking about Scandinavian-looking people with very strange powers, all at the same time frame.
And all have, in this day and age, the same legends and myths. Might have different names, but when you condense the story down, it condenses down into stories, and it all started at this kind of time period. So it was incredibly fascinating, absolutely fascinating.
To be continued.
Now, next week, what we're actually going to talk about is we're going to talk about disappearing islands, and this links in a little bit to the Tuatha De Dannan, because they were supposed to go to an island called the Tir Agnog or something. He's going to have to quickly look that up.
Tir Agnog. That's, well, funnily enough, if I remember rightly, the Tir Agnog is supposed to be, how can I put it? Right, you know, you've got the she stones, you've got the she circles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? Those circles are the portal to Tir Agnog. Tir Agnog is one of the islands that is reportedly seen appearing and disappearing off the west coast of Ireland, and there have been reports about it. The Navy reported it as well. There's been reports in the late 1800s and early 19th century.
Oh, don't say any more, because we're doing a show on it next week.
And somebody cue the X-Files music.
Well, I haven't got the X-Files music.
We'll
but we are going to have to say good night for now. And tune in next week to hear a little continuation on this. But we're going more onto the disappearing islands. And that, again, is another fascinating subject. But it does link into a little bit of what we've been talking about tonight. So I hope you enjoyed the
phallic
show.
Stuff as well.
Sorry?
Hopefully less of the phallic stuff and you going red as well.
Well, let's hope we stay off that subject. I can't believe how red I go.
Need to stay off it all week, love.
It's absolutely untrue. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us in the chat room. Thank you for tuning into Parasearch UK Radio, and we shall see you next week at 9 p.m. on Friday.
Thank you very much, guys. Thanks for listening. Bye.
You're listening to Parasearch UK Radio. News, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. Parasearch UK Radio.